recording. So I'm going to record this, and so that everyone who came late or couldn't make it because of the confusion around the meeting link, I will be sharing the recorded link to everyone. So that will be awesome. So thank you for being here. So who am I? So of course you guys have never met me before. My name is Alyssa Nager, and I have written a book. It's called Crushing Fleas. And it's a step-by-step guide to reclaiming peace, self-love, and the amazing you after an emotionally abusive relationship. I am an author. I've written children's books as well as a number of novels. I am also a trained life coach, Tony Robbins life coach. And in my other work, I am a digital strategist and the VP of marketing for a software company. So I'm also a mother, and I am a wife, and I am a survivor like you of a emotionally abusive relationship. The reason why I wrote Crushing Fleas is because I myself had a very hard time finding any kind of support around recovering from this type of relationship. I think a lot of people understand trauma, but not a lot of people understand what emotional abuse is. And in fact, 95% of people who suffer abuse in an abusive relationship also suffer the effects of emotional abuse. If they have physical abuse, probably they're suffering from emotional abuse. And what I know about recovery is, one, it takes retraining, and it takes retraining not just your mind. Certainly talk therapy helps, but it takes retraining your body and your soul. So the whole focus of the book and of this week-long challenge is working on how you actually reclaim you, the amazing you, because, we are all that we need. The other thing I know is recovery is a lifelong journey. And it takes a mind, body, soul approach. And so throughout this week, we're going to introduce you to a whole lot of different concepts and modalities around healing your mind, healing your body, healing your soul, and all the practical steps that it takes to get there. So what about fleas? Why is this book called Crushing Fleas? Well, what I learned in recovery is visualization is one of the tools that you can use. So, Beyonce, when she becomes Sasha Fierce on stage, she uses that persona to become somebody else. And that is what visualization is. She's visualizing this person that she becomes on stage. And when she goes on stage, she uses that visualization. Well, for me, it was several years ago now, but I had to return to New Zealand. And to me, New Zealand was, for want of a better word, for me, the place of war, the place of rape, the place where I had experienced this incredible trauma. And as I was landing in New Zealand, and I had cleared myself of all forms of anxiety. I mean, I still get anxiety in, certain normal situations, but I had recovered from PTSD. But as I was landing in New Zealand, my body just became completely overwhelmed, and tears started streaming down my face. And, as we all do, going through immigration, if you've ever traveled to a foreign country, you kind of feel like a criminal a lot of the time. You're like, whoa. It's intimidating is the word, I guess. And so we landing in New Zealand, getting off the plane, tears streaming down my face, totally embarrassed, walking up to the immigration person, and I'm just feeling my body, break down from the stress. And, he kind of gives me a dirty look. I'm like, I'm here to see my son. Eventually I get through there and I start to feel my legs weaken. And like a gift from the universe, um, I have this image of my ex as a flea, and I stomped him. I literally stomped him as I was walking through immigration, you know, getting to the next step, and I stomped him, and my gosh, I must have looked silly. Woman, tears streaming down her face, stomping on the ground. But for the rest of the time, I was able to use that visualization in New Zealand and, kind of swat away the flea. So every time I got a text or a message, or, he was trying from a distance to threaten me in some way, I just pictured him as the flea he was. And as an outcome of all this practice and training and everything else, you will be able to think of your significant other as a flea. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'm going to hopefully be trying to answer some of them. So what does a flea look like? Here are some things that we're going to cover today. What does a flea look like? How do you catch fleas? How do you know you've got them? Why are fleas so hard to get rid of? How do you exterminate the flea? This person that has so much power over your life. And then we're going to talk about the power of words. So what does a flea look like? Well, first of all, fleas are lawless. They have no respect for the law. So they will exploit the law in any way they can, and others for that matter. So as an example, when I first met my flea, he was always doing cash painting jobs. And I was like, oh, whatever, that's a bit weird. I know people do cash jobs. And I just sort of assumed that he was doing it in the proper way. But I just kind of pushed that aside. Because as you know, when you're in the, beginning of any relationship, you're sort of overwhelmed by all the excitement and falling in love and all that kind of stuff. So, those little red flags you kind of push aside. Chronic lies. Fleas lie all the time. They create their own little world. And these can be little white lies like, oh, so-and-so saw you at the grocery store. And no, gosh, they must have been seeing somebody else, that wasn't me. An amazing sense of entitlement. So, what's yours is mine. So you can pretty much expect that if you are, let's say you're earning a lot of money, the flea will just assume that that money is theirs and theirs to use. Lack of boundaries, and that only goes one way. So a boundary might be, hey, I'd really appreciate if you only call me between this time and that time at work. Because I need to work, because I'm busy or whatever. And you might find yourself getting 100 texts from the flea during exactly that time. Not only do they have no boundaries, but if you try to impose boundaries on them, you can expect some really, really major tantrums. And I'm sure you've experienced that. Where you're going out with your friends. I'd really like to go out with my friends on my own. That's not acceptable. So yeah, they don't have any boundaries. And I guess the most devastating part of working with fleas is their total lack of empathy. So they're not working from the same playing field that you're working from. As humans, we feel for other people, we feel hurt. Fleas do not have empathy, and they certainly don't have empathy for you. So, if you go to a flea and you're saying, gosh, please don't do that, you're really hurting me, um, they're going to respond in completely a either reactive way, tantruming way, or call you names like you're too sensitive or you're jealous or anything else. So they turn things around. Um, and the financial abuse. And I know nobody likes to talk about money, but 99% of abusers abuse their victims financially. And the devastating part of this is, of course, if you're trying to leave, if you need to escape, oftentimes, or most of the time, close to 100% of the time, let's be honest, you have no control of your money. They might have only access to all of your accounts and shut down your access. They might be hiding money. They may not have let you work for the past 10 years. So the financial abuse is another way of them locking you into their abusive system. So who's vulnerable? Who catches fleas? And this is where a lot of the shame sits, because I think there is a lot of misinformation out there. If you go and see a psychologist, you often would find that they will explain it to you like you were abused in your past, and therefore you attract abuse in your lifetime. Because of course, Freudian is all based on, you were growing up, what happened to you in childhood, and what are you missing? But that can happen. Absolutely. People who experience abuse can get involved in abusive relationships as adults, no doubt. But for me, this explanation didn't make a lot of sense. I didn't grow up in an abusive environment. I had a wonderful childhood with, an amazing family and a huge extended family, aunts and uncles around all the time, things like that, and tons of cousins, big Catholic family. So that didn't sit with me. And it turns out, 30% of people in their lifetime will experience an abusive relationship. That's a pretty big number. Of the 10 people that you just met yesterday, 3 of them have been involved in abuse. But this is my truth, and I think it is true that everyone is vulnerable to abusive relationships. And I'm going to explain why. So I am a Tony Robbins trained life coach. And the truth is, everyone is vulnerable. Everybody needs love. Everybody needs connection. And this is like a driving force. We are human. We need love and connection. And then we also need certainty. Tony Robbins talks a lot about certainty. So I need a home. I need a place, food to eat. I need friends. I need family. So we all need certainty, and abusers take advantage of these 2 primary needs. And then we're human. We want to believe our partners are good. We want to believe everybody's fundamentally good. And so because of that, we imbue trust in people. So our need to trust people and often blindly trust them. We don't, check our partner's phone. We don't check on our accounts. We don't do all these things because, hey, we just got married. Hey, we love our partner. I can see a lot of people are having trouble getting on right now. So I guess I'm just going to have to send the new link out for tomorrow. And record this and send this to everybody. So I apologize for that. Hopefully we'll sort that out and we'll be able to get more people on tomorrow. So the need for trust, the need for love, the need for connection, these are all human things, and abusers really know how to take advantage of that. And what do they want? Well, this is the other part of it too. When people talk about abuse, and I think why people are so shameful about it and they keep it secret, is because there's sort of this, idea that people who get abused are weak, or maybe they're poor, or maybe something's wrong with them. But sorry about that. But it's not the case. They want your power. And so, chances are you are intelligent, you are beautiful, you are all these things that they are seeking. So they need you because they need to fulfill this giant hole in their heart, and that is called narcissistic supply. So narcissistic supply is their driving power. Like, we need love, we need connection, we need all these things. They need narcissistic supply. So because they also have this lack of empathy, they will do anything, and I mean anything, to get that supply. And that's what you need to keep in the back of your mind, anything to get narcissistic supply. So they want your power and they need this supply. So how does abuse work? Well, there's this giant setup in the beginning, isn't there? Because they love bomb us. They basically tell us we are the greatest thing, the most amazing thing. We're the most beautiful, perfect, everything they always dreamed of. When you talk to people who've been through these relationships, the first month or year of their relationship is this woman or man who is just so sweet and kind and caring, calls us by the best pet names ever. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful experience. You're the, when you hear things like, you're you're what I've always dreamed of, they sometimes get involved really quickly in these relationships. And this is the setup, because for the rest of your relationship, you spend the rest of your time waiting for that wonderful person to come back. So you're often saying things to, your family and friends. As things they start to devalue you, you'll start saying things, and this is a huge warning sign, like, but they have a really nice side, don't they? So this is where the lock-in, sort of the lock-in and setup starts. And then there's devaluation, where they start to break you down. And this can be a very slow, quiet process in the beginning, where they just say things to you like, you're not really good at making friends, Alyssa. Or, your family, you're really not that close with your brother, are you? And it can start out slow, and then it escalates to way, more powerful things. And then there's discard. When they leave you, they cheat on you, they do whatever they need to do, because you're not giving them the supply they need. And this can happen on a macro level and a micro level. A macro level in terms of your overall relationship when you look at it, and then the micro level is, on a daily basis. So I love you, they get mad at you, there's a big explosion, and then maybe they don't talk to you for an hour, a day, a week, whatever it is, and that is discard on a micro level. So what does the big picture look like? Well, when you look at sort of abusive systems, people will talk a lot about abuse between you and your partner, but they don't often talk about the system that your partner creates around you. So all those little whispers you're hearing when you go out to see people or see your family, they're true and they're not true because they're actually lying to the people around you about you, and about your world. So, to give you an example of this, we used to have a holiday house, and we would go there, and I could never make any friends with the people that were around us. And I always felt like they were looking at me a little bit funny, like, why can't I connect? And as it turned out, my partner was telling all sorts of lies about who I was, what I did, how I acted in our relationship. And quite frankly, I don't want to know, but as you unpeel the narcissist, you will see this very Jekyll Hyde thing going on. And I wouldn't even be able to know the extent of what he was saying and what he was doing. So once again, this whole world is their pretend world, and they prop that world up with lies. So not only are you suffering in your own home, but you're suffering in your life, in your community, with your friends, with your family. It's very, very, very difficult. So, how do you know that you've got fleas? And because of the love bombing phase, and because you're always looking for that good side, it becomes, for some people, very difficult to understand if they're an abusive relationship. Here are some clues, and I would say overwhelmingly, the number one clue is if you're feeling sick and fearful all the time in your own home, and you're always waiting for that, Jekyll to come out, um, you quite likely are in an abusive relationship. But you have that sort of love cycle going on a daily basis. You are, like we said, isolated from your family and friends, and that can happen, over time, or it can happen in a very obvious ways, like, hey, my friends are coming into town, and then all of a sudden when your friends are here, gosh, we can't meet with them for this reason. um, Dependency, so they've made you, you know somehow dependent. It can be financially dependent, yes, definitely, but also mentally dependent. You can't really hold a job, you're not really smart, um, you're not able to go get your master's degree. They will do everything to keep you dependent on them. Feeling crazy, if someone's lying around you all the time, I went to the grocery store, so and so said they saw you at the grocery store, I wasn't at the grocery store. This is crazy making. How come you can go out with your friends but I can't? Total lack of boundaries. I'll put a ton of boundaries on you, but if you try to impose any sort of boundaries on me, I am going to have a major tantrum. And looking back, on these patterns, these tantrum patterns, it all becomes so clear. And once you sort of get an idea about the patterns, it's much easier to sort of step outside of them versus getting super involved in them. Um, and that's something we're going to talk about during the week. Um, Violence, yes. Intimidation, yes. Some abusers will never hit their partner because they know that is the only way that they can get in trouble, like with the police. Some of them will just continually to intimidate you physically, but never hit you. Lack of integrity. We talked about, money practices, lies. And this goes back to, actually figuring out what integrity means to you and what you're willing to live with. Very, very important in the recovery process, but also in avoiding these types of relationships. And then the whispers of the system around you, what's true and what isn't true. And yes, these people, the system around you is hearing all these lies from your abuser, and they have a perception of who you are because of it. Now, my best advice in with that whole system of abuse is eventually people are going to learn who you actually are. Probably not while you're in the relationship, but when you leave. So I spend very little time thinking about what other people think of me. I have regained all these relationships with people because I basically said, you know what? They're going to learn who I am. I know I am amazing. And eventually, over time, they are going to understand, sort of what happened and how they became the abuser's puppets too. And we've talked about this before, but two of the most devastating things really is the financial control and the control of your children, because it makes it really hard to leave. You do not want to lose contact with your kids, of course. Like most of you, I would jump in front of a bus for my child. And this is where the abuser is really smart about keeping you, sort of locked in. So how does this all work? I mean, this is a question that really just sort of blew me away for years. I would sit up at night just thinking, how did he take over my mind? How did I go from this, completely self-confident, big job, totally capable, able to do anything on my own with friends and family and everything else? How did I go from that to so desperate to keep this sort of unit together? And what this is all about is the power of words. I was sitting in a conference. I was at a conference, and it was about emotional intelligence. And the person speaking at the time started talking about words. And he said, if you hear something enough, it becomes a belief. And after I heard that, I just basically checked out of the rest of the meeting. The power of words. So let's like dig into that a little bit. Immaculée Ilibagiza, I'm going to mess up her last name right now. I don't know if you've heard the story, she basically watched her whole entire family get slaughtered. And there was a war going on between the Tutsis and the Hutus. And they had created this whole radio station where they basically talked about, these people are dirt, why not murder them? And sure enough, doctors, lawyers, smart, educated people ended up taking part in this whole slaughtering, a genocide of, an entire group of people. And when you watch her speech, which you should definitely look up online, it was all in the power of words, and, generations of people listening to this, that suddenly, these human beings became cockroaches. Chloe Madanes is Tony Robbins' partner in the Robbins Madanes life coach training. And if you read her book, which also I urge you to do, it's really amazing. She talks about this whole concept of training your brain as induction. And induction to her is the attempt to regulate the inner life of another person in order to preserve their own. Now, doesn't that sound relevant? Words train your brain, and this is ultimately the tool that abusers use to train your brain. And not only do words train your mind, They actually physically train your body. So if someone is, saying, Chloe gives the example of someone saying to you, "You're sad," or "You look sad," and suddenly your body starts to sort of feel sad. Or someone says to you, "You're happy," and you're like, "Well, yeah, I am kind of happy," and you start to smile, and you're actually physically training your body. um, we also have these hormones that go off. So you listen to a happy song and you're going to start getting those happy endorphins pumping through your body. um, so this whole process where an abuser is, constantly on a daily basis filling your mind with negative, awful words about yourself, you are going to, over time, train your body, train your mind, and actually at the cellular level and the neuron level in your brain to think these things. And I don't know if you guys have heard of neural pathways, but if you're always in fight or flight, that neural pathway in your brain is getting practice. And so when you leave, this is the simple explanation, but when you leave a relationship like that, this is why you have PTSD or CPTSD. Your body is in high alert 24/7. You may have been trained for years to be on high alert. So your body's pumping cortisol out all the time. Here's a positive example of how words can be so amazingly powerful. Muhammad Ali, one of the, was the greatest fighter on earth. But I love this quote because this is exactly what we're talking about. Ali said, "I am the greatest. I said that even before I even knew I was. I figured that if I said it enough, I would convince the world that I really was the greatest." Wow. And he did. And not only did Muhammad Ali train his body, um, he trained his mind with his words. And this was, if you've ever watched any videos of Muhammad Ali, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, he was the master of this. He convinced himself and he convinced the world, but he also continuously trained his brain in a positive way. So the power of words. If you are around an abuser, these words are constantly firing, cortisol, the stress hormone in your body, and you're literally making yourself sick. Not only that, but the abusive cycle, the love, hate, love, love cycle. Abuse becomes an addiction. As sick as that may sound, or as, horrible that may sound to you, you actually become addicted to your abuser. So, the rat in the cage that, presses for the jelly bean. If they press the button, they'll get the jelly bean, and then another rat in another cage, they never press the button, they never get a jelly bean, so they just stop pressing the button. But if you press the button intermittently, if you give them a jelly bean intermittently, they're going to start pressing that button frantically because they become addicted to getting the jelly bean. And that's what happens in an abusive environment. So when people come to me for help, I'm coaching someone and they say, but she has a really nice side, or he has a really nice side. That to me is a huge warning sign, because you're always waiting for that good side to come out. And believe me, as the relationship goes on, and this can be over years, that good side comes out fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer, far between. So how do you get rid of fleas? They are really hard to get rid of. Your body, your mind, your soul, you are totally addicted to them. Plus, you have lost your sense of self. And I think that's what when you are talking to professionals, this is the huge part of it that they really do not understand. That when you're going out, you're getting out of the relationship, you're being asked to step out, you're fighting addiction, but you're also the precipice that you're stepping out onto into the world again as you have no idea who you are. And it is really hard to fight for your money, fight for your children, fight for your home, fight for your whole life, when you're starting out from this place of extremely, extremely low self-worth. So how do you get rid of them? You have to remember who you are. You have to reclaim you. You have to reclaim your power. And this whole week, we're going to talk about all the tools that are available to you to do just that. You basically need to retrain your brain. And I mean train through practice, through physical practice, mental practice, and a whole lot of other things. You have to retrain your brain back and remember who you are, which is all right there. It's all here already for you. And it takes work, but it's worth it. Definitely worth it. So here are some of the things we're going to, this is what we taught. We cover all these things in the book, and we're not going to be able to get through all of this in 6 days. But I'm going to get through as much as I can. And what I want you to think about this is a toolkit. There's some things that you need to do, like on a step-by-step basis, and other things that you need to take for yourself. What works for you? So, we're going to talk about nutrition and exercise, and things like community. Where you find your community is entirely up to you. For me, my community, I live in a very small town. I have a fantastic community around me. And I also have a gym that I go to almost on a daily basis, pretty much on a daily basis, because that's where my community is. But that might not be for you. So there's other ways to develop community, and we'll talk about that. But think of this as a toolkit first and foremost, that you pick and choose the things that are going to work for you. There's a couple things I don't want you to pick and choose from, though. We'll talk about these, but one is meditation. Meditation is your friend, and we'll talk about why. But for me, that's something everybody, because your brain is on fire, because you have trained this sort of fight or flight part of your brain, we want to train and strengthen your frontal lobe. And that's what meditation does. So sort of meditation is something that I just want everyone to get involved in. And there's a lot of myths about meditation, so we'll get into that on day 3. But that's a must do. So here are all the things that we're going to cover. We're going to talk about community. We're going to talk about kicking anxiety to the curb, i.e. crushing PTSD. We're going to talk about changing the story, and that's a real fun one. We're going to talk about practice and practicing mindfulness, and specifically meditation. We're going to talk about nutrition and exercise. We are going to talk about boundaries in a big way, because that's one of the things that we really need to set up when we are trying to reclaim our power. And you're never going to get rid of the flea, but the flea is going to become exactly what that is, just a flying buzzy thing. We are going to learn how to create a vision. And I'm sure a lot of you have been stuck in this relationships for so long, you haven't thought about your future and your vision for your future, but we're going to talk about that and manifesting what you want and basically owning amazing. Tomorrow, day 2 of the challenge, we're specifically going to talk about kicking anxiety to the curb, changing the story, and about boundaries. So thank you so much for coming. I hope you join us. I'm sorry that I think a lot of people had trouble logging in. So I'm going to share the link so people can watch this on their own time today. And we will get to day 2 tomorrow. Remember, it's World Narcissistic Abuse Awareness Day. And let's get the message out there. And that's what we're doing right now. So I really appreciate it. It's so nice to meet you. I will send out a link tomorrow to the next day. And if you have any questions, you can go ahead and pop them into the chat if you like, or you can also, there's also a Q&A sort of button, and I can get back to you in the chat or individually. So it's going to be a great week. Thanks for coming. Yes, thanks. I got to put my glasses on. Thank you so much. Caston, I really appreciate it. All right, we'll see if we can get the correct link out today. And I'm sorry for that mess up. All right, have a great day, guys.